I'm going to take you through the entire process of opening a design and preparing it for embroidery, actually embroidering the design out, and talking about every step of the way. So in the Pfaff Creative Icon embroidery collection, I found a design I have not stitched out, and I thought, oh, it would be fun to do today. This particular one, I believe, has 3 colors, and so I do want to find this first in the machine, and we'll get it all set up ready to stitch. So first off, we're going to go over to the built-in designs, touch the little picture of the butterfly, and this is in the category called this and that. So way at the top, you usually come up to the very first one where like the signature designs are, Pfaff exclusives. Keep going until you find the category that your design is in. Now keep in mind that there's usually a lot more below, so make sure you scroll up until you find your design. So here is what we were looking for, this design here. So I touch and hold and it comes in. Next thing I want to do is I want to stitch it out on a larger piece of fabric. So I do need to tell the machine first off which hoop I will be using. Plan to do this first before you even start manipulating the design. 260 by 200 is the hoop that I'm going to be using. I've got the stabilizer hooped up, 2 layers of tearaway with my cotton fabric. I did use a little 505 spray to hold all these layers together. And oftentimes I will just kind of slide it underneath my embroidery foot and have it sit on the bed of the machine until I'm ready. So first off, hoop options, and then tell the machine that the hoop size that you're working with. So if it's a different size, make sure you turn it green, and then that way you can actually see which one you are working with. Touch hoop options to close it down. So the white part is the hoop area, so I could have my design any place in that hoop area. But first off, I am going to just go over to edit and then bring the design into the middle of the screen. So the easiest thing is to touch the control wheel and touch the center. You can see it goes back to 0, 0. So right in the center of that hoop. And just a little reference here. When you are looking at your hoop, you do have marks here to here, and then also through the center. So where that center part is. Now you're going to notice that this feels closer to the lower edge than it does to the top edge. And that is true. There's a little margin up here that the embroidery foot cannot embroider in. So you might say the top edge is about here, so that does put that center part a little lower than you might expect. But that's okay. It's really not that hard. So this is just I'm going to stitch it in the center. We're good to go. I don't really need to do anything. If I wanted to size it or rotate it, I sure can. I'll do anything that I need to do like that on this screen. Once I'm ready to stitch out, you're going to do just that. Touch embroidery stitch out. So we kind of move from one side of the machine where we can do stuff to that design to the second side, which is where we embroider. Now if I'm done embroidering or need to kind of go back and edit, I will flip back over to kind of the first page of embroidering, embroidery edit. But when I'm ready to go to stitch out, touch embroidery stitch out. Now before you actually, oh, here comes the embroidery hoop. This is why you don't actually attach any hoops to it until it actually moves into position. If the hoop was attached, it would have told you to unattach it. So just something to know. At this screen, I can just double check that I've got everything set up the way I had wanted it to. It is showing I have my straight stitch needle plate on. It is going to trim after every jump stitch, so that's usually good. I do turn that off sometimes when I'm doing lettering. That's not a bad idea. I don't need anything for basting in the hoop, and I'm not going to change anything. Like I want it to actually sew out in those 3 colors, but I do have an option to sew it all in one color, touch monochrome. Okay, from here I'm just going to touch OK, say that looks good, and then it does something I love. It shows me, I was thinking this design was going to stitch from the first color, second, and third. but I was wrong. It's actually going to start from the lower color, the darker one, and go probably up through this. So next I am going to attach the hoop to the machine. So let's talk about that. You do have a little part here, a kind of a lip that is going to sit right inside that area. And so what you want to do is just set it underneath your presser foot and then slide that completely in until it clicks. And I want you to be strong with this. I want you to give it a good push. Don't be afraid to push hard. I need you to hear that click. What I don't want you to do is push down on this at all while you're putting the hoop into position. But you do need to have it click into place. The only time you'll push down on that is when you go to release it. So you'll push down, pull the hoop to you, and then that's how you get it off. But for now, just go ahead, put it on, use those strong arms, and click it in place. Now you know that the machine and the hoop are properly connected. I've already put in an embroidery needle, so if you haven't already, make sure you change out your needles. And a little reminder of threading your machine. So first off, what I want you to do is thread with your left hand. So as I come across the top here and down, and then notice what I'm doing. I'm holding onto the thread up here, and I'm going to come up with my left hand. Right here, after I come down through here and up, I want you to do this. I want you to floss it back and forth. That gets it deep into the tension discs. Next, you can just continue to thread the rest of the machine as normal. This will get easier. Make sure you get the guide at the top of the needle, and then of course this is why you bought this machine, is for the automatic needle threader. I like to not touch it. After I use the needle threader, just let it be. If there's a little loop, if there's a little tail, if it's not where you think it should be, don't worry, just go ahead. When you're ready to stitch, we're going to go ahead and just touch the go button, or the one that looks like play. So the little movement that you just saw with the hoop, was it double checking that that was the hoop you told it was actually going to be using here? Oh, I have the speed really low, so the speed over here, I'm going to speed that up, and we are ready to stitch. If you want to stop the machine and trim this out, which is what I'm going to do, just go ahead and push the same button that you used to start it, and then go ahead and restart it again. So what are all those underlay stitches? Though this is like a little zigzag stitch. You'll see those when it stitches an area that's going to be a satin stitch. So you'll see that as it comes back around and stitches that heavy stitch over the top of it, it kind of keeps it lifted and it kind of raises it up a little bit, make it a little bit more dramatic. So see how it's doing those two lines? What it's going to do is now stitch over that, almost like railroad tracks, and it just makes that design pop off the fabric. So while it's stitching, let's go ahead and touch Stitch Out Progress. This way you can see where all the action is happening. So how much of the design has stitched out, what stitch number it's on, or how many more stitches it has for this particular color. And it does give me a general, kind of an approximate number of minutes left. Now that does change up a little bit sometimes as you're watching it. Now don't forget to download the fabulous Pfaff app that will also, if you are connected at Wi-Fi at home, that it will send you a notification when your color change is ready. So if you do wander off and keep your phone on you often, that is a great app for you to kind of know when to come back and put that next color on. So you did see that it cut it at the very end, and it did move, so it does actually show that it pulled it out. But for any reason, the next stitch is very close to where the last one ended. Just note that that has been cut, and I usually just go ahead at this time and pull off my thread. from the top. So I know that's something that a lot of times we hear people talk about. You need to cut it and then pull it through. I'm going to tell you why I don't really worry about that so much during the embroidery process. It's because that this thread is not linty, and usually embroidery is not linty. So I do usually pull it back through the machine. You saw me floss it right there. I'm putting my next color on. On screen, you see that it does show me to go ahead and change colors. And I realized too, I'm going to go ahead and touch OK. Now, if you just want to start stitching this next color, you can just go ahead and push the start button. You don't have to touch OK. It will go ahead to start. But I am going to touch OK because I want to touch the little part that looks like a little thread palette. These are actually the colors that are being used in the machine. And I realized that when I said earlier that my design shows just the part that it's going to stitch next, is it remembers that feature once you activate it. So if your design that has 10 colors comes up all colorful, when you touch the thread palette, touch where that little butterfly is that has a body that's a little darker. So when you touch that, see how this is probably how your machine is set up, but when you activate the butterfly, then it shows you just the color it's going to stitch next. And the beauty is that when you turn your machine off, that feature turns on once you activate it. So we are ready for color 2. There are times though I might skip a color or stop early or jump to maybe just stitching the last color. Whichever block of color has the green line next to it is the one it's going to stitch. So here's the first one. That's the one we're on right now, but you can slide through. So when you're ready to stitch, just go ahead, touch the go button over here. Remember, don't hold on to those threads and just go ahead and let it stitch the next color. See how this is cut? You can just swish your finger underneath it and then change thread. We're on the last color, so we're ready to almost see the final result. I love that sound. The sound of your embroidery is finished. So when you get the message on the screen, you can push down on that lever, pull the hoop to you. That last stitch is cut, and take a look at your design. So let's take a look at a couple things. Number one, love how it looks here, but what does it look like on the back? And what are we looking for? So let's talk tension for just a little bit. What you want to have, I have white bobbin thread in right now, is you want to see a little bit of each of the color coming to the back side. That means none of the bobbin thread is coming up to the front. But if we had seen bobbin thread showing on top, which sometimes that happens, you would adjust right here where it says 50, minus that down maybe to 40 or 35. That's going to loosen up that top tension and let it pull to the back side a little further. Now it's really hard to tell because on this area here, because that's a white thread on the top and white thread on the bobbin. But again, this should be with a nice little pretty halo where the satin stitching is when you have good looking tensions. You got a couple threads to trim maybe, or just leave them. It looks really nice back here. I think we're ready to find something to use this design with.